Okay, so you've now successfully added your funds, you've successfully added some portfolio companies, and you've added some investments within those portfolio companies, which you can see in the cash flows module, a quick summary. So you can see all of the amounts that you've added and the different dates that you've kind of invested in these companies. And as a reminder, those can be added in two ways. One, by uploading an Excel to the general ledger, which is a list of your transactions. Or the second way, which is to go into a particular company, for example, mining tech company, go to the investments tab and add a new investment. And this can be multiple different types, like convertible notes or equity, etc. Either way, the transaction will be added as a line item in the ledger. So transaction amount, date, description. So either way, it's going to result in the same outcome, which is it'll appear in your general ledger, it'll appear in your cash flows, and your capital invested amount for each portfolio company will be updated to be the sum of all the amounts you've invested in the selected fund. But the key input that we haven't gone through yet is adding valuations to the portfolio companies. And what do I mean by the valuation? In other words, might be the unrealized valuation of the fund's investment. Another word could be the fund's net asset value of its investments. In other words, the fund has invested X dollars. What is the value of those X dollars at the selected quarter? And this is a key input because this is what derives what the fund's IRR and what the fund's multiple invested capital, and which are the, as well as DPI, which are the 2/3 key metrics that investors would like to know about. Hence is why we track this every quarter. But how do you actually go and update the valuation? So you can see the unrealized valuation, which is this row here. You can also see at the bottom down here. But where does this data come from? So I've actually got a dedicated module over here where you can upload the unrealized valuation for each of your portfolio companies, or in other words, net asset value. You can use our tool to build up a detailed valuation for each portfolio company, or you can do a bulk upload and even upload all of the historical valuations for each company. So how it works is, by default, if you don't change the valuation, we'll assume that you want the value or the net asset value of each of those companies to stay at the same amount that you invested. So we've already gone through and changed all these numbers in here. But if you were to open up the valuations module for the first time and you've added investments, all of the numbers will be exactly the same, which means that your multiple invested capital will be at 1 times because the value of your investment hasn't increased. And the IRR will show as 0%, again, because the valuation hasn't increased. So as we discussed, there's 2 ways you can upload the data. Either just going to a single cell and just clicking through the options, or doing a bulk upload. So doing a bulk upload via Excel. So let's go through the first option, which is let's just manually edit one of these valuations. So what we can do is we can actually click on the number. We wanted to edit the valuation for mining tech at the quarter ended December 2023. And we've got basically 3 approaches here. We've got the simple approach, which we can just literally just type in what number we want the valuation to be at. So let's go 48 million. You can even add commentary or upload a supporting file if that's relevant. Click save. As you can see, the valuation is now increased. The value is below cost, which is why our multiple investment cost is below cost. If we wanted to increase the value, let's say that we want the value of this company to be 150 million. You can click save. And all of a sudden, the valuation is worth 3 times the multiple invested capital because it's tripled in value. Now, just as a reminder, this isn't the value of the entire company. This is just the value or the unrealized value of the amount today that the fund has invested. We don't really care about the total value of the company, just what the fund has invested. But if you're getting confused, we do have a more granular approach to work out what that valuation number should be. So we call it the detailed method. And basically, you can work out what the value is by working upwards from a certain metric. So for example, EBITDA. We'll talk about where these numbers are coming from in a moment, and you'll notice that it's just pulled the last 12 months of EBITDA from our metrics module, which we talk about in a different video. But basically, you can set up custom metrics for each company. You can request the data from your portfolio companies, and that's where that number is coming from. So we know that the value of this, that the EBITDA of this company is around $25 million. So the enterprise value, or 100% value of the company, is worth roughly what the market would say is they'd apply a multiple on that. So some companies, like VC type companies, you might do it on a revenue basis. Others you might do on a gross margin basis. And others, typically more your private equity style companies, will be valued on a EBITDA multiple. So let's say in this case, we're going to value the business at 8 times EBITDA. That means the enterprise value, or in other words, 100% of the business, is worth almost $200 million, or 8 times EBITDA. Now, the next step is to get to equity value, which is basically adjusting the business for the value of debt and cash in the business. So if you've got 2 identical businesses, they both got the same EBITDA, but one has, let's say $1 million cash on the balance sheet. they're exactly the same in every other way, then theoretically, the value of the business which has $1 million in cash versus the one that doesn't should be worth about $1 million more, because the person who buys that company then can take that cash out, which is why we adjust for cash and also conversely debt. So debt would go the other way. So you can see that would actually reduce the value of the equity. The next two options, control premium, marketability discount, this is more if, according to IPEV, which is the International Private Equity Valuation Standards, it's good practice to apply a discount or sometimes a premium to the valuation. And the discount is primarily because in the private market, often it's less liquid, so therefore you should be reducing the value of your investment because of that liquidity factor. Similarly, if you own more than 50% or you have control of the business, you could argue to increase the value of your stake. So you can play around with those percentages to adjust the equity value as needed. Otherwise, feel free to just leave it as 0. Next is the fund's ownership percentage, because this is the value of 100% of the business, but we want to work out what is just our fund stake, right? Because if you remember, what we're trying to work out is what is the value of the fund stake. So we pull this number from the cap table, but if you want to replace that number, we can go 67%. And as you can see, we've now adjusted the total value of the company by the fund's ownership percentage. We also have these options here, which can be a little bit confusing, but if you do need that ability to calculate liquidity preference, we have that. Otherwise, just leave it as no. So that's now the fund's value, 131 million. So we can see how much the fund is valued. We can see the value of our investment and what the multiple invested capital is. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and it's now going to update the valuation to reflect that number. So that's a more granular approach if you'd like. Now the final option, which may not be applicable to you, but the option's there if it is relevant, is if you own any listed stock or if you own any crypto, what you can do is you can actually pull the stock price for that particular share, and also we know how many shares you have because of the cap table. So what you can do is you can either just type in the number of price per share, or you can actually run a stock ticker. For example, let's go USD Bitcoin, for example. Either way, I don't know the exact ticker for it, but you can run that stock and it'll pull the price per share. So if it ends up being, $5 or $50, we can work out the number of shares times the price per share equals the fund equity value. So we can save that number in there. I'm not going to do that because I think this number is pretty good. Cool. So the other way we can actually upload this data, and this is probably better if you want to do it the first time, so including historical periods like previous quarters, if you want to update the valuation for those, just so you can kind of see the trend of the increase over time rather than just one big increase in the current quarter. What you can do is click over here, click upload. We do have a template that you can download like so. And what this will do is it'll actually export the list of your companies just like you've got it here. So it'll have all of the custom names of your companies. And also if you've got any multiple types of investments over there, like for example, you've got equity investment, debt investment, etc., and you want to actually split those out separately. As you can see, actually I'll just share my screen again. So I've now exported this file. As you can see, it's got our list of custom companies. It's split out our investments. So we can see in certain rows, we've just got the combined amount of all investments per the general ledger that we've uploaded. So we can just type in the valuation at the aggregate level. But if you do want to split it out, you can do that, which is why some of these have like equity investment, debt investment. You can even value like different rounds individually if you like. So what you can do is you can just do a bulk upload like this, type in the numbers. So let's say we wanted to change these valuations to, let's just copy these across. Okay, let's go ahead and upload this file now. Okay, cool. So I've got side by side here. We've got our valuations on the left, and we've got the Excel file, which I've just made some changes. I've put in more accurate numbers over here. And the other thing you can do, right, is you can go back to the earliest investment date. You can just update the quarter. So maybe change that to 30/2023. So if you want to add like historical periods, which I think will look the best for your charts, etc., to go back to the earliest date for each company that you've invested in. If you hadn't invested at that point, just put 0 for those respective companies. Otherwise, you can add multiple dates as columns and upload all of this at the same time. So what we're going to do now is I've got the file. I'm going to upload it. So I've downloaded the template, filled it in. I find the file in my downloads. It's now rendered that file. Okay, so it's matched, for example, equity investment to SaaS business. And you can see, for example, the 8 million has been filled in there. The 45 has been filled in there. So it's matching the exact investment for each. So that's all great. That's good. And now it means when I go back to, for example, my dashboard, we can check like our valuations over time. You can see it looked really nice because I've actually filled it in for multiple historical quarters since valuation. And that also means that we can accurately track our IRR across multiple historical periods, as opposed to if you just did a single valuation in one quarter, then you just kind of have like a flat line and then a big jump, which doesn't look right, doesn't look too nice. So it is best practice if you can upload all of your historical quarters of valuations as well. So if it wasn't clear before as to kind of why some of these companies have a single line, right? So here, for example, Mining Tech, it's just a single line of valuation, and others have, for example, two lines like equity investment per GL. The difference is how the investment has been set up. These two investments, basically, we've been able to add an equity investment. So if you go to the company's view for SaaS business, click over here and go to our investments, we've actually added a very specific type of investment, equity investment. And the reason we do it this way is we want to allow the ability for certain funds, because they do want to apply granular level of valuation across different tranches of investments they've made. And some funds prefer just to value their entire asset, their investment in aggregate. So if you prefer to value all of your investments in the company in aggregate in a single line, simply just upload your investments via the general ledger. Just do a bulk upload by Excel. And if you actually want to break out each individual tranche of investment and actually value them slightly different, so you can calculate different multiple invested costs, different IRR for Series A investment, Series B investment, etc., or your debt investment, then go to company, manage, add investment, and add that investment level there. That will allow you to then track each tranche at a different valuation, whereas everything else has just been uploaded via the general ledger. So hopefully that all made sense. It's an important thing to do, just to upload your valuations, but you don't have to. If you don't, just have a flat kind of multiple invested capital and IRR. But it's good so that at all times investors know what is the current IRR and multiple invested capital if you were to sell the entire portfolio today, which is an important metric for them to track growth of their investment.